done it again in game one. Oh my gosh, here we go with this again.
He is incredible. Just when it seemed like Maxime had no problems with the queen d5, Maxime plays that sloppy move, rook to d8. He didn't jump forward. He instead played a bit passively, and that's when Magnus pounces. He's a 1-0 lead, but look at Magnus, by the way, with the black pieces, playing this modern line, this kind of rat variation. He's not striking in the center with his pawns. Instead, he's staring at the center with his bishop, and maybe with his other bishop being carrying to b7, he'll do it with both.
And Magnus is enjoying himself in the early going of this match. He's taking MVL out of his comfort zone. He's saying, I don't want a Berlin. I don't want a Sveshnikov. I don't want a theoretical dispute. I want fresh, interesting positions, and I want to be able to play for a win with both colors. But Robert, you took the words right out of my mouth. From a computer perspective, MVL's mistake came later than Rook D8. It was still a draw. But from a human perspective, Rook D8 was definitely the culprit. Had he played 94, it was basically a 2-result game. A shocking moment, honestly, in the early going. And these are the mistakes that you simply cannot make against the world champion if you expect to give him a run for his money.
Yeah, Magnus is like kind of the evil force in a paranormal movie. They sense fear, they smell it, they sniff it out, and then they capitalize and punish you for it. So Magnus, he wins game one. But here in game two, he's playing some kind of cagey chess. He has control of the g4 square. His knight or bishop can go there. But look at White's play. All 4 minor pieces in a row. Connect 4, you win. Not in chess, unfortunately. And the center is strong, d4 and e4. So what is Black's plan here, Don? And what do you see Magnus going forward with?
First of all, I happen to be terrible at Connect 4, so if you actually want to beat me in a game, I'm telling you right now, that's the one you should choose. What is Black's plan? Well, Black's plan is to apply pressure on White's center, and there we have knight b8 to c6, a very typical move, and you might say, why is Magnus walking into d5? Well, think about d5 from a positional perspective. You're opening up the bishop, and you're yielding Black a very nice stronghold on e5, and later on, if we bring up an analysis board here, if White just nonchalantly plays d5, after something like knight e5, you can see the eval bar dipping. What can often happen, Robert, is a move like c7, c6, chipping away at White's center. And once the queen comes out to b6, it combines with the bishop, and the pressure on White's queen side can become very serious very quickly. So MVL avoids this with a 10-foot pole. And if we go back to the live board, he has decided on knight c3 to e2. I think he's going to follow up with c3 to cement his center with his pawns.
Oh, that was a very instructive line. It shows the power of the fianchetto bishop, which often happens in a Sicilian dragon or even in a Grunfeld. So knight c3 to e2, something that Wesley did very well against Maxime, retreating moves. And Magnus, he says, I'm not retreating. I'm hopping forward, left and right. Knights on b4 and g4. You don't see this every day. And if knight takes d5 back, well, your knight is centralized, but how stable is it? You will play c6 as you're indicating, but it's just a weird position, right? What is Black really aiming for?
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, c7, c5 would be the pawn break you really want to achieve, but it's hard to do it as long as the knight remains on d5. Magnus playing it more modestly. You know, what this structure reminds me of is almost like a Scandi or an Alekhine. Once Magnus played d5, the pawn structure changed completely, and there's no doubt in my mind that White is better. Objectively, White has better control of the center, etc. Yeah.
You're going to love this reference. I was saying this reminded me of a Sergei Tivyakov game. Like, I'm looking at this, and I'm just
exactly.
Like, you know, the legendary Dutch Grandmaster, formerly over 2,700. This looks like the type of game he would have from the black pieces, but look at Magnus. He goes a5. He's slowly pushing his pawns forward, but he wants to kick the bishop off the diagonal, but Maxime does it himself. He blocks that bishop's path by playing c4, kicking the knight from d5. But I don't know. Something about this feels way too loose for White, the d4 pawn in particular.
Yeah, I made an analogy a couple of commentaries ago. Positions like these resemble driving a bus. I have no idea how to drive a bus, but it's hard to maneuver this around tight corners. Black is a pretty compact position, and the good thing about not having any pawns in the center is that you're not responsible for them. White is responsible for a lot of things in this position, let alone a big decision that is now looming. Where is White going to castle? Both sides have major drawbacks. If you go queenside, you're walking into some sort of a4, a3 shenanigans. If you go kingside, well, you have a pawn on h4, Robert, and we know that that creates serious long-term weaknesses. I think White is still better objectively, but I agree that the position is perhaps harder to handle from a practical standpoint.
Yeah, just because the d4 pawns sticks out like a sore thumb, right? Black at some point can play e7, e6, which keeps all of the pawns strong. I like to say this, pawns are only as strong pawn chains, I should say, as their base pawn. The d4 pawn doesn't even have a pawn attached to it. The knight on f3 is stable. That's the good news. But look at this, knight h7, step 1. If we can continue putting pressure on the d4 square, that'd be nice. And bishop e3, maybe not so appealing because the knight on g4 can capture it. I see the eval bar saying white is doing well. I think you can play in the center with your rooks and keep everything steady. And bishop f4 saying bishop takes d4, please capture that. Rook d1 is my response.
Great move by MVL because this also prevents the pawn break e7, e5, and in the event of bishop takes d4, rook d1 doesn't actually win the bishop technically due to c5, but I'm not even in the mood to discuss that line. There's no way Magnus plays bishop takes d4 here. In that position, of course, white has knight c3 to b5, recapturing the bishop with interest.
Yeah, this position looks very nice for Maxime. I like that. Well, first of all, he's eating again, so he's in good spirits. But I also like the fact that he's reacting objectively. He's not scared of Magnus. He never has been. He beat Magnus in this format, and he's just saying, let me make standard, principled moves. And what does Magnus have to show for it? The pawn a5?
Oh!
My
lance, girl!
I thought you were the prophet. You said he wasn't going to do that.
Well, I think it's a bad move.
Oh, but the pawn on h4 is loose in some variations. Is he sacking his queen?
But how does this work? What if white plays knight takes e5 here?
Maybe bishop takes
What exactly?
e5.
Yeah, he is sacking his queen.
Yeah, knight e5, and after bishop e5, bishop takes. He's giving up his queen.
And he's saying that in return, he will get active rooks. And the type of position, Robert, I almost called you Magnus, which frequently results in a fortress. I know, because the knight from h7 can return to g4 and create long-term problems on white's first rank. I still can't believe he's done this.
Can we just shout out the feature chat? The username, Kiblitzers. That is awesome. If that person doesn't have a diamond membership, can I give that to them? I know it's not really my choice, but somebody give that person a diamond membership for that username if they don't already have one. But either way, it is going to be a queen sacrifice at this point, I believe. So. Queen takes h4 is a blunder. Knight f3 back. Always look for retreating moves. That would be a fork. So bishop takes e5, rook d8, rook d8. And the good news for Magnus is that there aren't too many targets in his position. The queen is better than the rook and the bishop. But as you're highlighting, that knight will get back into the game. The f2 pawn will be a target. That's on a dark square. It's a bishop that can land on d4. And there are 2 open files. There are 2 rooks.
There are indeed 2 rooks, and white has only 1 rook. And MVL attacking perhaps the only target in black's position, the tender b7 pawn. And I think he's going to contribute to that by playing knight e4 in response to rook d7, try to get the knight around to c5. The issue, as you were pointing out earlier, is that you're weakening the second rank. And before you know it, black can infiltrate d2 and play bishop d4. Black's just got more pieces than white, and that could cost white in the long run. Let's see how Magnus handles this position. He had a similar type of game against Fabiano Caruana, where Fabi was winning at several points, and Magnus ended up turning it around down to queen and winning it in the style that he beat Nepo in, I think it was game 6, right, of the World Championship?
Yep. That is correct.
That
and Maxime
insane game.
is also up nearly a minute on the clock. Something that should not be forgotten about is the clock plays a factor here. And Maxime has been very good on the clock. He lost game 1. I know that was not an ideal ending, but he has been steady at knight f6. Look at Magnus. Let's just trade knights. If you take, I take back. h4 is loose. I'll go rook f to d8 afterwards. And you can go for my a5 pawn. But that distracts white's forces from some of the critical squares. Ooh. If white does, in fact, go for the queen side, maybe Magnus will go for the king side.
Sriracha. MVL says, no, I don't want the trade. I don't want to play without risk. I want to win this game. Knight e4 to c5, inviting rook d2, but I think he's got queen e3 in response, forking the rook and bishop. That was great tactical awareness for Maxime, and he forces Magnus's rook to stay on the 7th rank. But still, Robert, you can't take on b7 on account of rook b8. How is Maxime going to turn up the pressure dial in this position? Because Magnus is about to go knight g4.
Knight g4 looks very promising. He goes rook to e8. Oh, watch out for back ring checkmate, by the way. That's why he goes g3. But the problem with playing g3 is now you're not going to be able to play f3 to kick the knight out. Yep. So you've committed your pawn structure in the dark squares. f3 would be way too weakening. That knight would go h6 to f5 and start attacking those dark squares. So I think while the eval bar says Maxime is favored, I'm not so sure in a blitz game, but that's why I like Maxime's clock management. He is ahead on time. He can figure out these complications with that lead.
I don't know, though. I don't see a way for him to improve on the queen side, and Magnus now has all sorts of shenanigans on the other side of the board. I'm even thinking about sacrifices with rook e1 to follow, and this is all going to come true if white's rook departs the first rank. So MVL is kind of frozen here. He has so many squares and so many tactics to keep track of, and as we're talking, Robert, he's already dropped to 50 seconds on the clock. If this gets down to a time scramble, I think black actually holds all of the cards here.
If the bishop gets to the a7 g1 diagonal, it might be over. So bishop b8
Whoa!
might be a move you need to keep an eye on, because bishop a7 and rook e2 all at once. You're unleashing the power of those pieces. You made this comment. It may have seemed like a very obvious one. Black has more pieces. You have a rook and a bishop for a queen, even number of pawns. A rook and bishop can team up on a square. A queen by itself cannot. Knight e7.
My lands.
That seems to be a mistake. Is rook b8 just the response?
Rook b8. What does MVL's follow? It's rook d8 check, but takes in bishop d4, creates mate threats against white's king. I think Magnus might go for that. Alternatively, is there bishop takes g3 maybe?
I like rook b8. I mean, I understand rook d8 check is happening, but with the time trouble ensuing, Magnus down to 12 seconds. He plays it back to 14, and now we're going to see a swap in bishop d4. F2 is falling.
Uh-oh. Bishop takes f2 is a dagger, followed by rook e1. Magnus infiltrates with his pieces. Rook g1 is a huge threat.
Rook e3? He had rook e3 as well.
Oh, he did, and queen b8 check there would have been forced. He plays it anyway.
Okay. The good news is that queen
F4?
protects the g3 square. That's huge.
MVL just munching on the pawns, and he's 3 pawns up on the queen side.
Oh, gosh. And where's that king going? Bishop a7 check, a huge threat.
Oh, my gosh. It is a huge threat. And king h3 gets checkmated. Bishop a7 anyway.
Rook e3.
I think
We might
it's a
see a
perpet.
draw. Yeah, it is a draw. King f3 and king g2 back. Rook e3, rook e2.
Don't go crazy if you're Maxime. Take the draw, and same goes for Magnus. What a game.